I'd like to say it's good to be here this morning. Good to see everyone out. Our Bible study is kind of slim this morning. We have those that are out sick. There's some sickness in the Schultz family, in the Brown family, and things of that nature. And I know several families said they were going to try to get here at the worship time, but with all the sickness floating around, they thought it best not come. So anyway, I want to remember them in our prayers. We know being holiday time, we have people traveling and things of that nature, so want to remember them also. Also want to remember Brother Mike Pack from Boaz. That's Hillary's daddy. That's my son's father-in-law. He passed away Thanksgiving Day, about 3:15-ish Thanksgiving Day. So the funeral's going to be tomorrow. So Peggy and I will be leaving out in the morning, going up to the funeral. The funeral service is actually going to be at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. They're going to have visitation from like 11:30 to 2 tomorrow also. So anyway, we want to remember that family in our prayers. Mike lived almost 4 years from the time he was diagnosed, and then he went through brain surgery, chemo, radiation. And they said even after all that, he wouldn't live but 15 months. But he lived 4 years. So might have been 4 years and a day. I can't remember exactly, but it was wrong about this time 4 years ago when he was diagnosed. So anyway, Eric, would you open us with a word of prayer, please?
Father in heaven, we're thankful for this day. We're thankful for the blessings of the day. We're thankful for this opportunity to come out to study another portion of your word. We pray as we study and meditate on all these valuable lessons. We'll examine ourselves and necessarily have application in our lives we need to. We pray for Brother Bobby. We pray for a ready recollection of things he prepared to go over. We pray for good health for him. And we pray, Father, for all the sick folks that aren't able to be here today, all the ones we know, the blessings only you can, especially be with the Pack family and their time of loss, dear Father, help them cope as best they can. In Christ's name we pray.
Amen. This morning, we're going to begin our lesson in Deuteronomy chapter 15. To be honest with you, I'm for one that we made it through Deuteronomy chapter 12 and Deuteronomy chapter 14. Those two books to me, those two chapters to me, seems like almost to be like the book of Romans.
I think we gotta go, Mary Kate needs to go to the hospital.
Oh, okay.
She's got a virus, they're all sick with virus, but she just texted and said it feels like she needs to go, so we.
Okay, well, okay, go. Well, so you may be a grandpa here in a little bit. Yeah, let us know, Dane. Okay, all right. Okay, that's good. I, for one, am glad to get through Deuteronomy chapter 12, chapter 4. A lot in there. There's a lot in there that Moses reminds them of, that being the Jewish people they readily understood how to get all that done, okay? But you know, for us today, it still looks like that, well, how did they do all that? Well, it doesn't tell us. We know they done it. They had to do it. But anyway, it's like the book of Romans to me. There's a whole lot in there that takes a lot of study and thought on to understand it. But anyway, Deuteronomy chapter 15, we're going to be doing the conversation like this. At the end of every 7 years, a release must be made. And that's pretty much the theme of that chapter, the 7 years of release. And we find that this was something that God ordained, and the reasoning behind it, as we get into it, is to remind them, well, you were slaves in Egypt, and God delivered you, so those within the land that are servants unto you should be released. Those that owe you debt should be released. And we're going to see a chart here, a little bit of a timeline as we get down toward the end of chapter 15. I want to show you. This 7 years of release is going to be kind of problematic with Israel. Matter of fact, it's going to get them into some trouble, among other things that were going to get them into trouble, get Israel separated and carried off into Babylonian captivity. But we'll get to that in just a minute. Deuteronomy 15 showcases God's instruction to the Israelites on how to uphold the values of generosity, care for the less fortunate, and ensure economic justice in the society they were about to establish in the Promised Land. By emphasizing debt cancellation, the release of slaves, and the ethical treatment of the poor, the chapter underscores God's deep concern for social justice. And you know, when you stop and think about that, we hear a lot about this thing about social justice today, and man has his own ideas and things like that. But you know, God's plan is the best plan, isn't it? Maybe if we want to pattern social justice, it might not be a bad idea to go back to Deuteronomy chapter 15, okay? And look at those guidelines that God has laid down about the treatment of each other and what's expected of us, okay? And we know, too, that in this, you have to do your part, okay? If you're a servant, an indentured servant or slave, as the KJV says, then you got to do your part, too. It's not a one-sided thing, is it? There's a relationship between the servant and the master, isn't there? Just like today in the workplace, which is really a type or shadow of the same thing, the employee has a responsibility in the workplace, so does the supervisor, right? So it's a two-way street in these things. So it's not one-sided in these things. Verses 1 through 6, Sabbath year, canceling debt. And I'll start reading, Jeff, and then I'll let you read some too. Okay. What did I say, 1 through 6? At the end of every 7 years, thou shalt make a release. And this is the manner of the release. Every creditor that lendeth off unto his neighbor shall release it. He shall not exact it of his neighbor or his brother, because it's called the Lord's release. Of a foreigner you may exact it again. That which is with thine brother, and thou shalt release. Save when there shall be no poor among you, for the Lord shall greatly bless thee in the land. For the Lord thy God giveth thee an inheritance to possess. Only if thou carefully hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all these commandments which I have commanded thee, for the day of the Lord thy God blesseth thee, as he promised thee, and thou shalt lend unto many nations, but thou shalt not borrow. Thou shalt reign over many nations, but they shall not reign over thee. So what we find here is God's plan about the canceling of debts. Does that necessarily mean that a person could go out there knowing that every 7 years a debt would be canceled and get debted to someone and not pay them? Well, no, you got to do your part, okay? You got to provide payment, and if you're of the character of person, if we'll go back and look at some of this that we studied earlier, we are obligated to pay our debts, aren't we? So if you're continually paying your debts and stuff, in theory, shouldn't be hardly any debt left, if any, should there? Okay? And so we find that this was to be done. But now, if there was a foreigner within that, this didn't apply. This particular law here of Moses did not apply to the foreigner. They could exact it again, but thy brother shall be released. And you know, we find that part of this was being done because God really didn't want any poor people among them. Now, when you look at this, you're going to find that this particular statute, like I say, is going to be problematic with Israel. When we take a look at it down toward the end in Daniel chapter 9, you're going to find that Daniel prophesies something about this, that premillennialists today confuse what is being said about the 70 weeks of Daniel. So there's a tie-in between what's going on here and this command, and at best, Jeff, they didn't keep it. That was one of the few that, you know, if they did, it was very spotty, okay? It was one of them kind, I guess it's like, well, you owe me and you're going to pay me, and you know, it's kind of like a lot of human wisdom got injected into this thing, okay? But anyway, so he says, and one thing too that he didn't want them to do was lend to many nations. I mean, they could lend to many nations, but not borrow. Well, why didn't God want them to borrow from the nations around about them? Well, you become obligated, don't you? Okay? You lose control. Okay? So he didn't want that, them to do that. Every 7 years, a Sabbath year is proclaimed where debts are to be canceled. While lending is encouraged, God's desire is there be no poor among the Israelites. He assures them of blessings if they obey this command, making them lenders, not borrowers, to other nations. So that's kind of a quick summation of what this canceling of debt is about. The spirit of generosity, verses 7 through 11, generosity to the needy. Jeff, would you read that?
If among you one of your brothers should become poor in any of your towns within the land that the Lord your God has given you, you shall not harden your heart or shut your hand against the poor brother, but you shall open your hand to him and lend him sufficient for his need. However it may be, take care lest there be any unworthy thought in your heart, and you say, the 7th year, the year of release is near, and your eye look grudgingly on your poor brother, and you give him nothing, and he cry to the Lord against you, and you be guilty of sin. You shall give him freely, and your heart shall not be grudging when you give him. Because of this, the Lord your God will bless you in all your work and in all that you undertake. For there will never cease to be poor in the land. Therefore I command you, you shall open wide your hand to your brother, to the needy, to the poor in your land.
Okay, so, earlier up there it said about no poor being in the land. Well, that was what God wanted. He wanted them to take care of each other. So basically what you would have is a structure within that to where if a person needed this, they needed this. If they needed that, they needed that. And it's kind of like I can remember down toward the end when things kind of changed. I got to see a glimpse of maybe what he's talking about here. I know where I grew up, the farmers kind of took care of each other, okay? We grew grain, crushed cow feed. Some farmers grew sugar cane, so we would trade cow feed for sugar cane to crush in with the cow feed. Some farmers grew a lot of watermelons and tomatoes, so we'd trade out whatever for that, okay? So when everybody took care of each other like that, nobody went lacking, but in a way, everybody kind of lived at the same standard, didn't they? Okay? So that's kind of what he's getting at. But he does realize that there will be poor among you, okay? Whatever the circumstances, that's going to be. Even Jesus said, the poor you shall have with you always. So there are going to be those out there that are in need. And there are circumstances sometimes that will put people in that particular category, okay? A lot of times it may not due to the fact that they're not working and things of that nature. Maybe sickness got involved. Maybe an injury got involved. Maybe whatever got involved, okay? Maybe a family member, they had to spend all their money on the doctors and things of that day, to try to heal them. I mean, there's a whole host of things that may have happened with that. So God set up a provision to take care of the poor. And he warned them, when you do your benevolence, don't let it be with a wicked heart, okay? A lot of times people give because maybe they feel like there's social pressure to give. Well, I got to give this right. It's kind of like giving to the Lord. I got to go down into the church building, I got to put a collection in the plate. May well keep it and stay home, ain't you, Jeff? It's your heart, it's your attitude about it, okay? And he said that could be sin, and if you do that. So he said that you shall open thy hand, verse 11, wide unto thy brother, to the poor and to the needy in thy land. So God recognized the fact that there would be those poor and needy in the land, okay? So he wanted them to have a lot of benevolent work in their heart. Greg, you like you got something to say?
I was just going to refer to Matthew 6, verse 3.
Matthew 6, verse 3. Go ahead and read it.
It's, I'm reading from New American Standard Version. But when you give to the poor, Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving will be in secret.
There you go. Yeah, so there again, it gets to into the heart, doesn't it? Are you doing it to be seen of men? Well, if you're doing it to be seen of men, the reward is you're getting patted on the back by men, right? But if you're doing it out of the kindness of your heart, then the reward that you're going to get comes from God, doesn't it? And that's very good verse to look at in connection with that. So there are things the way that God wants them to be done. The Israelites are reminded to be open-hearted and generous toward the poor and needy, not hardening their heart. God knows there will always be needy people. So he commands continuous generosity, promising blessings in return. I don't have the passage of Scripture in my mind, but when it comes to giving, well, what does the New Testament teach us? That if you give it, God will give it back to you, running in, pour it down, running over. Brother Herbert Keith used to say, if you'll shovel it out, God will shovel it back in. Guess who got the bigger shovel? So that's a point there with it. Freedom for servants, verses 12 through 18. Greg, have you got that?
If your kinsman, a Hebrew man or woman, is sold to you, and he shall serve you 6 years, but in the 7th year you shall set him free. When you set him free, you shall not send him away empty-handed. You shall furnish him liberally from your flock, and from your threshing floor, and from your wine vat. You shall give to him as the Lord your God has blessed you. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you. Therefore I command you this today. It shall come about, if he says to you, I will not go out from you, because he loves you and your household, since he fares well with you, then you shall take an awl and pierce it through his ear into the door, and he shall be your servant forever. Also, you shall do likewise to your maidservant. It shall not seem hard to you when you set him free, for he has given you 6 years with double the service of a hired man, so the Lord your God will bless you in whatever you do. Okay,
So here we have, I think verse 15 may be the key to what's going on here in chapter 15. And thou shalt remember that thou wast a bondsman in the land of Egypt. Remember, you were a servant. Remember how when you were released of your servitude in Egypt, God blessed you. He allowed you to take the spoils of Egypt with you. So the same thought pattern is there in mind. It's this commandment was to be more of a commandment of remembrance. Okay, it's kind of like, Greg, maybe we say today, you need to remember where you come from. Keeps you humble, right? Okay, so that seems to be what's going on here. Now, here again, the servitude it's talking about here are the indentured servants, and then you got hired hands. When you say an indentured servant, think about the servitude of the British system. You know, you think about their system, they have maids and butlers and things like that, don't they? Then they have the hired help. You know, a lot of times the hired hands will do the gardening and the planting and things of that nature. Even though some of the servants will be involved in, most of their work is done generally around the house, isn't it? I mean, in the household, around maintaining the house, those types of things, cooking and all those types of things. Now, there were indentured servants that did farm and all, but those indentured servants generally were the overseers of the hired hands, okay? So, kind of the way it worked, and this is kind of what he's getting at here. Remember, when we went through the book of Exodus and Leviticus, one of the things that God forbade and stated that he does not want you to be men stealers and kidnappers. Those that are caught kidnapping and man stealing are put to death. So see, it's not talking about slavery as we think about slavery over here, okay? It's more of an indentured servant. God has never approved of men stealing, going to somebody's house, kidnapping them, and then selling them into some type of into some type of slavery program, okay? And we do see some of that today, generally over in some of those northeastern countries over in Africa, somewhat over there too, across the pond there into the Middle East. We find that still going on today. They'll run down there and kidnap people and steal people out of villages and things of that nature and sell them in the slave market, won't they? So over here, we don't see so much of that. What we see more is what's called human trafficking, isn't it? Turning those people into slaves. Well, that's condemned by the Bible. Man stealing and kidnapping is flatly condemned, okay? So anyway, what he's talking about here are those servants that you have that are indentured unto you, but the seventh year, what are you supposed to do? Release them. And if you release them and they want to go, then you're to give them some of the spoils of your flocks and fields, aren't you, as you send them on the way. As a matter of fact, he recognized the fact that the indentured servant is worth double the hired servant to thee. So it seems like the indentured servant was more productive in the general scheme of things than the hired servant was. Okay, so anyway, so that's what he's talking about there. Verse 15 would be the key. Now, if he wanted to stay, that's fine. But there was a mark that was put on him in the ear to show that he was an indentured servant for life, kind of a reminder, well, this is, you decide to stay, this is where you belong, this is, okay, so anyway. If a Hebrew man or woman is sold to another Hebrew, they are to serve them for 6 years. In the seventh year, now this word sold, we went through that in the book of Exodus and Leviticus too. The word sold here does not necessarily mean purchased. Okay, that sold word there kind of gives you a connotation of slavery, but that's not what he's talking about. Do I sell my services to my employer? Yeah. So have I sold to my employer? Yeah. I sold my services to my employer for a price, okay? So what if I needed something, but I didn't have any income available, and so I go where I knew there was some work, and I say to this person, I tell you what, dude, let me work for you today so I can obtain this. Or maybe I owe a debt to that person, but I don't have the means to pay the debt back, so I go there and say, I'll work for you for the next year to pay my debt back. Okay, are you still selling your services? That's what it's talking about, okay? When you see that word sold. They are to serve them for 6 years. In the seventh year, they must be set free. When releasing them, they should not be sent away empty-handed. Instead, they should be generously provided for from the flocks, the threshing floor, and the wine press. This generosity is rooted in remembrance that the Israelites was once slaves in Egypt. So really it was a reminder that, hey, listen, this is where you came from, okay? Just like the Lord delivered you, now I want you to deliver these people out of bondage. But I want you to send prosperity with them like the Lord gave you prosperity to go with you out of Egypt. Jeff, you got a comment on that?
Well, I was thinking here is the 7th year that was set for them to release all the debts. That's a different 7-year period than the 7 years that the slave has to.
That's a good point. I don't know. I don't.
I'm just thinking about
Yeah,
it.
yeah, okay. I didn't.
The person becomes indentured to you.
Right.
You have to serve for 6 years.
Right.
No matter what the other.
And right.
6 years.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't notice anything on that. That's a good point. Sure is, and it may be a separate.
And that's
What it appears like. Yeah. Okay. Okay. And it could be because really when you stop and think about it, that may be because maybe I go to work for you today, and then 6 years from now, in the 7th year, you release me, but the next person may not go to work for you for a year from now, so his 6-7 year period would fall different than mine. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think, okay, that makes sense, doesn't it? Okay.
It's not just a general rule for
Yeah.
every slave. It's
Right, right,
slave.
right. Right.
Therefore, it's exactly what we've had all along. God has made provision.
Right, he made provisions, didn't he? Right, yeah, okay, that's cool. Very good. Verses 19 through 23, consecration of firstborn animals. Okay, all right. All firstling males that come of the herd and of thy flock thou shalt sanctify unto the Lord thy God. Thou shalt not do no work with the firstling of thy bullock, nor the shearing of firstling of thy sheep. Thou shalt eat it before the Lord year by year in the place which the Lord shall choose, thou and thy household. And if there be any blemish therein, as if it be lame or blind or have any ill blemish, thou shalt not sacrifice it unto the Lord, but thou shalt eat it within thy gates. The clean and unclean person shall eat it like the roebuck and the hart. Only thou shalt not eat the blood thereof, thou shalt pour it upon the ground. So some of this we have heard before. The firstborn of the flocks, they didn't eat them, did they? They saved them for sacrifice. Okay? But they had to be without blemish. Okay? Now, if it was of blemish, then you could eat it in a general meal. And we talked about the clean and we talked about the unclean, okay, last week, in chapters 12 and 14, where we talked about that great extensively. You could eat it just like you would eat a deer, okay, or a gazelle or whatever, okay? But still, there was a prohibition there. You can't eat the blood. So we see that repeated over and over and over. And the reason being the pagan customs that they were seeing around about them, and a lot in Egypt that was one of the things they did was drink blood or eat blood and offering to their gods, didn't they? Okay, so he still tells them, don't you do that. Don't you do that. Every firstborn male animal of the flock and herd is holy to the Lord and should not be used for labor or eating. They are to be eaten in the presence of the Lord during annual feasts. If there's any defect in the animal, then it's okay for you to eat it at home. So here again we get back into, got to remember distinction between the common meal and the worship meal, okay? And we use the church as an example today. We have the authorized meal that we use in worship, right? But then we have the common meals we eat at home, don't we? So it's the same thing. I eat whatever at home. I eat, I'm going to just use something simple and easy. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and rolls or toast or light bread, right? And drink some tea. And that's okay. I can eat however I want to cook it, okay? But now if I bring that chicken and that light bread and that tea or whatever here and put it on the Lord's table and say, Lord, here's my item of worship for you, what have I done? I've transgressed the command. It's just the same thing here, okay? There were things that were utilized for the worship of God that you wouldn't bring in the house of God to eat. But then if you're having a common meal at home, whatever, okay? So anyway, one human life is worth more than all the treasures of the earth. And so, when you look at chapter 15, you look at the provisions God has made, kind of a good thought, isn't it? That he is making provision for those that are in the world. There are those that are prosperous, okay? There are those that are poor. There are those that are needy. So he has made provisions for all of them. Deuteronomy 15 is not just a set of rules, but a blueprint for compassionate society. It is an invitation to live in a way that values every individual, ensures economic justice, and promotes shared prosperity. In a world often driven by self-interest, these ancient guidelines remind us of blessings that come from generosity and the kind of society we can build when we prioritize the well-being of all. So, I used to hear my daddy and his sisters, my aunts, and them talk about things that went on after the turn of the century, the 1900s, the Depression, and things of that nature. And it was a whole different mindset, Daddy talked about, and I'm sure Brother Con knew him, there was a Dr. Campbell that was one of the doctors there in Prattville about that era of time. And Dr. Campbell, back then, doctors would make house calls. I remember Daddy talking about Dr. Campbell would come out, and before he left, how he was paid, Jeff, he might get 2 dozen fresh eggs. And he might go to the next house and get a dozen tomatoes. You know, that's taking care of things, isn't it? And if somebody was sick, well, the community and the members of the community would do what? They'd make sure food was provided, wouldn't they? You know, so it's a whole different mindset on this thing. So our society has changed a lot in the past, well, I'll say 100 years, a whole lot since post-World War II, hasn't it? Yeah. That's why I said this, maybe if we really want to look at putting together something as a social justice program, maybe we need to go back to the Bible and build a program and not wisdom of men, okay, on these kind of things. Teaching points. Okay, 70 weeks of Daniel, release over 7 years captivity. Now, the reason I brought this in here is because a lot of times when you go to studying this and you go looking at some commentaries, they're going to refer back to how Israel got in trouble about this 7-year thing, okay? They're going to refer back to this, and it's called the 70 weeks of Daniel. And it's in Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 through 27, okay, where Daniel prophesies about them being in captivity for that 490 years, okay? You find a reference back in Leviticus chapter 25, verses 1 through 7. It talked a great deal about the 7 years of release. And of course, we were in Deuteronomy chapter 15, okay? But you find where the mess up comes in, there are those that like to take the prophecies of Isaiah and Daniel and Joel and apply them to some future event called the rapture, premillennialism, and things like that. But that's not what it's talking about there. Let's turn over to Daniel chapter 9. I'll read that very briefly, and then I'll show you the flow on it. But I wanted to kind of drop that in there because you will run into that, okay? If I can get out of Ezekiel. Come on, Daniel. There you go. Now, you got to remember, Daniel, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, they're in bondage, right? They've been carried away as captives into the land of Nebuchadnezzar, into the land of Babylon, okay? So here, Daniel is doing some prophecy. And of course, we also talk about Daniel chapter 7 a lot about where he prophesies in the day of those kings, the Lord shall raise up his servant, the establishment of the church, and things of that nature. But as you get over into Deuteronomy chapter 9, notice what it says, and I'm going to begin in verse 23. At the beginning of thy supplication, the commandment came forth, and I am come to show thee, for thou art greatly beloved. Therefore understand the matter and consider the vision. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon the holy city to finish the transgression and to make an end of sin and to make a reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness and to seal up vision and prophecy and anoint the most holy. All right, right there, what's he talking about? If you notice what he's talking about, this reconciliation being made during these 70 weeks, and it's going to lead up to what? The most holy. Well, that's another reference to Jesus, isn't it? Okay? Notice what it says here. Knowing therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem unto Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks, 62 weeks. The streets shall be built again, and the wall even in troublesome times. This refers back, and I'll show you in just a minute how this flows, to Ezra chapter 7. When Cyrus allowed Ezra to go back and start doing what? Rebuilding Jerusalem, right? And the wall there. You'll see how this fits in, okay? And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself, And the people of the prince that shall come destroy the city, the sanctuary, and therefore shall be with a flood unto end of war, desolation is there. So what's he talking about there? Well, he's talking about when Christ comes, he's going to die, isn't he? Okay, he's going to be cut off, right, from the living. And he was for 3 days, wasn't he? But he was resurrected, and then what's going to happen? The destruction of Jerusalem. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the obligation to cease. For the overspreading of abomination he shall make it desolate, even until consummation, and that determined shall be poured out upon the desolation. So he's talking about utter destruction of Jerusalem here, isn't he? It's going to happen in the days of Jesus. Well, after Jesus' birth, death, and resurrection, okay, AD 33. So this, and it's more to it than that, but I'm just trying to do a quick summation of it, okay? Israel failed to celebrate this. Each of the 70 captivity years represents a violation of a sabbatical year requirement, as 2 Chronicles 36:21. Okay, so there's violation of this 7th year thing. Okay, how does this flow? Ezra was sent back to do what? Rebuild the temple and the temple wall. Ezra chapter 7, verses 6 through 7. I don't have time to read through that. And verses 9 and 9, chapter 9, verse 9. From what we could tell, that took place about 457 AD. Okay, Daniel had prophesied this happening about 80 years prior to this, okay? So this was about 80 years in the future, what Daniel was talking about in Daniel chapter 9. 70 weeks times 7 years, as it talked about, they failed to embrace the 7th year of crop resting and all. That equals 490 years. So how does this fit? 457, from when Ezra was sent back to rebuild the temple that is prophesied about. 490 years is going to be the year of punishment. You subtract those two, look what you get. AD 33. What happened in AD 33? The most holy one, the high one, Jesus Christ. Now, there are those that say that 490 years, because of some of the weeks involved there that it talked about, actually worked out to be 486 BC, okay? Well, okay, let's just play with that then. 486 BC from 457 BC still equals 29 AD, okay? You know, there's some thought from when you date this at where the church was started in AD 33, AD 30, even AD 29. So, but the whole point is, what does it come back to? Jesus Christ, doesn't it? That's what the 70 weeks of punishment's about. It's a period of time where all these events that are going to take place leading up to the coming of Jesus, okay? The Messiah, the Holy One. This prophecy leads to Christ, is what it leads to. And so Herbert used to say he knew how they come up with all this premillennialism and rapture and stuff. He knew exactly book, chapter, and verse they got it from, Jeff. He said the 33rd chapter of their imagination. Okay, so. Deuteronomy 15, 1 through 2 describes the commandment to counsel debt every 7 years. This practice underscores the importance of mercy and prevention of perpetual poverty. At the end of every 7 years, you must counsel debt. This is how it is to be done. Every creditor shall counsel the loan he has made to his fellow Israelites. And we talked about all of that. God's provision. He emphasizes that obedience to God's commands will lead to his blessings and provision. There will be no poor among you, however, because the Lord shall surely bless you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess as an inheritance. So, if they follow this plan, there shouldn't be any poor among them. Okay, but in reality, what did we find? There was. And this is what open-handed generosity is about in verses 7 through 11, and I'm going to have to run through this pretty quick. If there is a poor man among your brethren, you're not to harden your heart or shut your hand from your poor brother. The reason of the Hebrew servants, that was in verses 12 through 15, and we talked about that just a few minutes ago. Voluntary servitude provides a possibility of a slave choosing to remain with their master and things of that. And we talked about that. Deuteronomy 15 is not just a set of rules, but a blueprint for a compassionate society. It is an invitation to live in a way that values every individual, ensures economic justice, and promotes shared prosperity. In a world often driven by self-interest, these ancient guidelines remind us of the blessings that come from generosity and the kind of society we can build when we prioritize the well-being of all. And you know, when you look at the world in general, was that written to the world in general? Actually, it was written to Israel, wasn't it? How would that apply to the church today? When you come over into the New Testament, we find a lot of the same principles on it. The church is to take care of itself. The church is to take care of its own. The world is out here, okay? They do whatever. You got to remember, all these nations that's going to be around about Israel were pagan, wasn't it? So this was written to them, to Israel, you know, about how they should act and how they should treat each other and things of that nature. And so, Greg Griffith, look at there, we're at the end of chapter 15. So, I guess that means 16 next week, doesn't it? Okay, we got to stop right there and get ready for the worship service.